Did you know that the humble tomato sitting in your kitchen has one of the most fascinating and controversial histories in the plant kingdom? This vibrant red fruit that we now consider essential to cuisines worldwide was once feared as a deadly poison and rejected by entire civilizations. Moreover, what started as a small, wild berry in the mountains of South America has evolved into one of the most diverse and beloved crops on Earth, with varieties that would astound even the most experienced gardeners. The story of tomatoes is not just about agriculture, it's about human courage, scientific discovery, cultural exchange, and the incredible adaptability of nature itself. From their mysterious origins in the Andes to their dramatic introduction to European society, tomatoes have traveled a path filled with superstition, innovation, and remarkable transformation. To truly understand tomatoes, we must journey back thousands of years to the rugged landscapes of South America, particularly the regions that we now know as Peru, Ecuador, and northern Chile. Here, in the shadow of the towering Andes Mountains, wild tomato plants first emerged as small, hardy survivors in an unforgiving environment. These ancestral tomatoes bore little resemblance to the large, juicy varieties we know today. They were tiny, often no larger than modern cherry tomatoes, and possessed a concentrated flavor that was both intense and slightly bitter. Archaeological evidence suggests that indigenous peoples of South America began cultivating these wild tomatoes as early as 700 AD, recognizing their potential as both food and medicine. The Incas, in particular, developed sophisticated agricultural techniques that allowed them to grow tomatoes at various altitudes, creating some of the first selective breeding programs in human history. They understood that by choosing the best plants and saving seeds from the most productive specimens, they could gradually improve their crops over generations. What makes this origin story even more remarkable is the diversity that existed even in these early varieties. Wild South American tomatoes displayed an incredible range of colors, sizes, and flavors, a genetic diversity that would prove crucial for the plant's future global success. Some were deep purple, others bright yellow, and still others displayed stripes and unusual patterns that seemed almost too exotic to be real. The journey of tomatoes from their South American homeland to the rest of the world began with one of history's most important plant migrations. Spanish conquistadors and traders, exploring the vast territories of the New World, encountered these strange fruits and were intrigued by their potential. However, the path from South America to global acceptance was not direct. It took a crucial detour through Mexico that would change everything. In Mexico, tomatoes found a perfect new home. The climate, soil conditions, and agricultural practices of Mesoamerican civilizations provided an ideal environment for tomato cultivation to flourish. The Aztecs, with their advanced understanding of agriculture and plant breeding, quickly adopted tomatoes and began developing new varieties that were larger, more flavorful, and better suited to their culinary traditions. The Aztec word tomatl gave us our modern English word tomato. But more importantly, Aztec agriculturalists transformed the plant itself. Through careful selection and cultivation, they developed tomatoes that were significantly larger than their South American ancestors, with improved flavor profiles that balanced sweetness and acidity in ways that would later captivate European palates. Furthermore, Mexican cultivation practices introduced tomatoes to new growing techniques and companion planting methods that increased yields and improved plant health. The integration of tomatoes into Mexican cuisine during this period established many of the flavor combinations and cooking methods that would eventually spread throughout the world, laying the foundation for countless dishes that we now consider essential to global cuisine. When Spanish explorers finally brought tomatoes to Europe in the 16th century, they triggered one of the most fascinating food controversies in history. Rather than being welcomed as an exciting new crop, tomatoes were met with suspicion, fear, and outright rejection by much of European society. This reaction was not entirely unfounded. There were legitimate reasons for European caution that went beyond simple neophobia. The primary source of European fear stemmed from a genuine medical mystery. Wealthy Europeans who ate tomatoes from pewter plates often became ill with symptoms of lead poisoning, including stomach pain, neurological problems, and sometimes death. What they didn't realize was that the high acidity of tomatoes was leaching, lead from their expensive pewter dishware, creating a toxic combination that had nothing to do with the tomatoes themselves. This tragic misunderstanding earned tomatoes the nickname poison apples and created a stigma that would persist for centuries. Additionally, European botanists classified tomatoes as members of the nightshade family, which included several known poisonous plants. This scientific classification, while accurate, reinforced popular fears and provided what seemed like scholarly evidence for the dangers of tomato consumption. Religious leaders also contributed to the controversy, with some declaring tomatoes to be evil or unnatural because of their vibrant red color and exotic appearance. Despite these obstacles, tomatoes gradually found acceptance in certain parts of Europe, particularly in Italy and Spain, where the climate was more suitable for cultivation and where culinary traditions were more open to experimentation. Italian gardeners and cooks began developing new varieties and recipes that would eventually revolutionize European cuisine, though this acceptance process took several centuries to complete. Moving from this historical foundation to the present day, we discover one of the most remarkable aspects of modern tomato cultivation: the incredible diversity that exists within this single species. Today, there are over 10,000 recognized varieties of tomatoes grown worldwide, a number that continues to expand as plant breeders, gardeners, and agricultural scientists develop new cultivars for specific purposes, climates, and tastes. This extraordinary diversity is the result of centuries of selective breeding, hybridization, and adaptation to local growing conditions around the world. Each variety represents a unique combination of characteristics: size, shape, color, flavor, growing habits, disease resistance, and environmental adaptability that makes it suitable for specific uses and preferences. The range of sizes alone is astounding. At one extreme, we have micro tomatoes that are smaller than a grape, weighing less than an ounce, and perfect for garnishes and specialty dishes. At the other extreme, we find giant varieties like the Mortgage Lifter and Cherokee Purple, which can weigh several pounds each and provide enough fruit for an entire family meal. Between these extremes lies an incredible spectrum of sizes, from cherry and grape tomatoes to standard slicing varieties and everything in between. Shape variation is equally impressive, with tomatoes ranging from perfectly round globes to elongated, paste varieties, from deeply ribbed heirloom types to heart-shaped novelties. Some varieties produce clusters of small fruits, while others develop single, massive specimens that require support to prevent branch breakage. Among the vast array of tomato varieties available today, heirloom tomatoes hold a special place in the hearts of gardeners and food enthusiasts alike. These remarkable varieties represent living links to our agricultural past, carrying within their genetic makeup the stories of generations of farmers, gardeners, and families who carefully preserved their seeds and passed them down through the years. Heirloom tomatoes are defined by their age, typically varieties that are at least 50 years old, and by their open pollinated nature, which means they reproduce true to type when seeds are saved and replanted. Unlike modern hybrid varieties, which often produce offspring that differ significantly from their parents, heirloom tomatoes maintain their unique characteristics generation after generation, preserving both their genetic integrity and their cultural significance. The stories behind heirloom varieties are often as fascinating as the tomatoes themselves. Many were developed by individual families or small communities, selected for specific traits that met local needs or preferences. Some were brought to new countries by immigrants who carried precious seeds as reminders of their homeland. Others were developed by dedicated plant breeders who spent decades perfecting varieties for particular climates or culinary purposes. These heritage varieties often display characteristics that have been bred out of modern commercial tomatoes in favor of traits like uniform appearance, shipping durability, and extended shelf life. Heirloom tomatoes frequently offer superior flavor, with complex taste profiles that can include hints of smoke, wine, citrus, or tropical fruits. They also tend to have more delicate skin and tender flesh, making them ideal for fresh eating. The preservation of heirloom varieties has become increasingly important as commercial agriculture has focused on a relatively small number of standardized cultivars. seed-saving organizations and dedicated gardeners work tirelessly to maintain. These genetic treasures, understanding that each variety represents not just agricultural diversity, but also cultural heritage and potential solutions to future growing challenges. Perhaps nothing illustrates the incredible diversity of tomatoes better than the spectacular range of colors available in modern varieties. While most people associate tomatoes with the classic red color, the reality is far more vibrant and varied, with tomatoes available in virtually every color of the rainbow and many combinations that seem almost too beautiful to be real. Black. Tomatoes, such as the black crim and Cherokee purple, develop their dark coloration from high concentrations of anthocyanins, the same compounds that give blueberries and red wine their distinctive colors. These varieties often have rich, complex flavors, with hints of smokiness and wine-like notes that make them prized by gourmet cooks and tomato connoisseurs. Purple varieties range from deep, almost black purples to lighter lavender shades, often hornets, with unique flavor profiles that combine traditional tomato taste with subtle fruit-like undertones. Yellow and orange tomatoes, such as yellow brandywine and orange Russian 117, offer lower acidity levels and often sweeter flavors than their red counterparts, making them appealing to those who find traditional tomatoes too acidic. Green. Tomatoes aren't just unripe red ones. Varieties like Green Zebra and Aunt Ruby's German Green remain green even when fully ripe, offering unique flavors and striking visual appeal. White and cream-colored varieties provide the mildest flavors and are prized by those with sensitive palates or acid reflux issues. Striped varieties represent some of the most visually stunning tomatoes available, with patterns that can include green stripes on red backgrounds, purple stripes on pink bases, or complex multicolored patterns that make each fruit a work of art. These varieties often combine the flavor characteristics of their constituent colors, creating complex taste experiences that reflect their visual complexity. Transitioning from the broader spectrum of tomato diversity to a specific category that has captured the hearts of gardeners and consumers worldwide, cherry tomatoes represent one of the greatest success stories in modern plant breeding. These small, bite-sized fruits were specifically developed to emphasize two key characteristics that have made them incredibly popular: exceptional sweetness and rapid growth. The development of cherry tomatoes required careful attention to sugar content, with breeders selecting varieties that could concentrate sweetness into small packages. This process involved understanding the relationship between fruit size and sugar concentration, as well as the environmental factors that influence sugar development in growing fruits. Modern cherry tomato varieties can contain sugar levels that rival many fruits, with some varieties reaching Brix levels, a measure of sugar content, that approach those found in grapes or melons. This sweetness, combined with the convenience of bite-sized portions, has made cherry tomatoes popular not just as garden crops, but as healthy snacks and salad ingredients. The fast growth characteristic of cherry tomatoes makes them ideal for both commercial production and home gardening, as they can produce harvestable fruit in as little as 60 days from transplanting, compared to 80-90 days for many full-sized varieties. As we've explored the fascinating origins and incredible diversity of tomatoes, from their ancient South American roots to the rainbow of varieties available today, we've only begun to scratch the surface of what makes these plants so remarkable. The journey from wild Andean berries to the 10,000+ varieties we know today represents one of humanity's greatest agricultural achievements. However, understanding where tomatoes come from and the varieties available is just the beginning of successful tomato growing. In our next section, we'll delve into the essential growing conditions that these diverse varieties need to thrive, exploring how factors like sunlight, soil, water, and temperature work together to determine whether your tomato plants will produce abundant harvests or struggle to survive. Now that we've marveled at the incredible journey of tomatoes through history and their astounding diversity, let's turn our attention to understanding these remarkable plants themselves. After all, to truly appreciate and successfully grow tomatoes, we need to understand what makes them tick at the most fundamental level. Here's something that might surprise you. Tomatoes are actually perennial plants. Yes, you heard that right. In their native habitat of South America, tomato plants can live for several years, continuing to produce fruit season after season. However, and this is where it gets interesting, We typically grow them as annuals in most parts of the world. Why do we treat these perennial plants as one-season wonders? The answer lies in their temperature sensitivity. While tomatoes can theoretically live for years, they're incredibly vulnerable to frost and cold temperatures. Even a brief encounter with temperatures below 50 degrees can cause significant stress, and anything approaching freezing will kill the plant outright. This temperature sensitivity means that in most climates, tomato plants simply can't survive the winter outdoors. In tropical and subtropical regions, where temperatures remain consistently warm year-round, tomato plants can indeed behave as the perennials they naturally are. Some greenhouse growers also take advantage of this trait, maintaining tomato plants for extended periods in controlled environments. However, even in these situations, most commercial growers replace their plants annually because young, vigorous plants tend to be more productive and less susceptible to disease than older, established ones. This perennial nature explains why tomato plants can grow quite large when given the chance. In ideal conditions, indeterminate varieties can reach heights of 6 to 10 feet or even taller, developing extensive root systems and robust stems that can support massive amounts of foliage and fruit. Understanding this fundamental characteristic helps us appreciate why tomatoes respond so well to proper support systems, and why they seem to have an almost unlimited capacity for growth during the growing season. Moving deeper into the botanical realm, tomatoes belong to one of the most fascinating plant families in the garden world, the Solanaceae, commonly known as the nightshade family. This connection isn't just a matter of scientific classification. It has real implications for how we grow and understand these plants. The nightshade family is a diverse group that includes many plants we interact with daily. Potatoes, those staple tubers we can't imagine life without, are close cousins to tomatoes. Eggplants, with their glossy purple skin and creamy flesh, share this family bond as well. Bell peppers and hot peppers, from mild bell varieties to scorching habaneros, are all part of this extended family. Even some plants we might not expect, like tobacco and petunias, belong to the Solanaceae family. This family relationship explains several important characteristics that tomatoes share with their relatives. For instance, all nightshade family members contain alkaloids, natural compounds that can be toxic in large quantities. In tomatoes, these alkaloids are primarily found in the green parts of the plant, including the leaves, stems, and unripe fruit. This is why green tomatoes should be eaten in moderation, and why tomato leaves should never be consumed. The nightshade connection also helps explain why tomatoes are susceptible to certain diseases and pests that affect other family members. Diseases like early blight and late blight can affect tomatoes, potatoes, and other nightshades. Similarly, pests like the Colorado potato beetle and hornworms may target multiple plants within this family. This is why crop rotation is so important. Planting tomatoes in the same spot where potatoes, peppers, or eggplants grew the previous year can lead to soil-borne disease problems. Understanding this family relationship also helps us appreciate why companion planting works so well with tomatoes. Plants that benefit one nightshade family member often benefit others, while plants that compete with or harm one family member may have similar effects on its relatives. Transitioning from family relationships to environmental needs, we must understand that tomatoes are absolutely devoted sun worshippers. These plants have evolved in regions with abundant sunshine, and they've retained this strong preference throughout their domestication journey. Tomatoes require full sun exposure, which means they need between 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight daily for optimal growth and fruit production. This isn't just a preference, it's a requirement for healthy development. When tomatoes don't receive adequate sunlight, several problems arise that can severely impact both plant health and fruit production. Insufficient sunlight leads to weak, spindly growth as plants stretch desperately toward available light sources. This stretching, called etiolation, results in plants with long internodes, spaces between leaves, pale green foliage, and weak stems that struggle to support the plant's weight. These light-starved plants are more susceptible to diseases as their compromised immune systems can't effectively fight off pathogens. Perhaps most importantly for gardeners, inadequate sunlight directly impacts fruit production. Tomatoes need abundant energy from photosynthesis to produce the sugars that make their fruit sweet and flavorful. Plants grown in partial shade may produce fewer flowers, and those flowers may not develop into fruit. When fruit does form, it often remains small, lacks the full flavor potential, and may fail to ripen properly. The quality of light matters, too. While tomatoes can tolerate some filtered light, such as morning sun followed by dappled afternoon shade, they perform best in locations that receive direct, unobstructed sunlight for most of the day. South-facing locations are typically ideal in the northern hemisphere, as they receive the most consistent and intense sunlight throughout the growing season. For gardeners with limited sunny space, it's worth noting that tomatoes will generally outcompete many other vegetables for prime real estate. Their high light requirements and generous production make them worthy of your sunniest garden spots. Just as a house needs a solid foundation, tomato plants require well-prepared soil to reach their full potential. The soil requirements for tomatoes go beyond simple fertility. They need a complex balance of drainage, nutrition, and pH that supports their vigorous growth habits. Well-drained soil is absolutely critical for tomato success. These plants have extensive root systems that need oxygen to function properly. When soil becomes waterlogged or poorly drained, roots can't access the oxygen they need, leading to root rot and other serious problems. Waterlogged conditions also create ideal environments for soil-borne diseases that can devastate tomato plants. However, well-drained doesn't mean dry. Tomatoes are heavy feeders and drinkers, requiring consistent moisture throughout the growing season. The ideal soil holds moisture well, but allows excess water to drain away, preventing both drought stress and waterlogging. This balance is often achieved through the addition of organic matter, which improves soil structure and water-holding capacity while maintaining good drainage. The pH level of soil plays a crucial role in nutrient availability. Tomatoes prefer slightly acidic soil with a pH between 6.0 and 6.8. This range allows for optimal nutrient uptake, particularly important minerals like calcium, which prevents blossom end rot, and iron, which is essential for healthy foliage. When soil pH falls outside this range, nutrients may become chemically locked up in the soil, unavailable to plants even when present in adequate quantities. Soil testing is an invaluable tool for tomato growers. A simple soil test can reveal pH levels, nutrient content, and organic matter percentage, providing a roadmap for soil improvement. Many cooperative extension offices offer soil testing services, and home test kits are readily available for gardeners who want immediate results. Finally, let's explore one of the most transformative additions you can make to your tomato garden: organic matter in the form of compost or aged manure. The impact of these amendments on tomato growth is nothing short of dramatic, and understanding why they're so beneficial helps us appreciate the complex needs of these remarkable plants. Compost and aged manure provide far more than simple nutrition. While they do supply essential nutrients, their greatest value lies in their ability to improve soil structure and biology. These organic amendments create a living soil ecosystem that supports vigorous tomato growth in multiple ways. From a structural standpoint, organic matter acts like tiny sponges in the soil, holding moisture during dry periods while creating air pockets that ensure proper drainage. This improved structure allows tomato roots to penetrate deeply and spread widely, accessing nutrients and water from a larger soil volume. The result is stronger, more resilient plants that can better withstand environmental stresses. The biological benefits are equally impressive. Compost and aged manure introduce beneficial microorganisms into the soil: bacteria, fungi, and other microscopic life forms that form symbiotic relationships with tomato roots. These microorganisms help break down organic matter into forms that plants can readily absorb, effectively extending the feeding period throughout the growing season. Aged manure, in particular, provides a slow-release source of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the three primary nutrients that tomatoes need in large quantities. The aging process is crucial because fresh manure can burn plants and may contain harmful pathogens. Properly aged manure, at least 6 months to a year old, provides gentle, consistent nutrition that supports steady growth without the boom and bust cycles that can stress plants. Compost offers additional benefits through its diverse composition. Good compost contains materials from various sources: kitchen scraps, yard waste, and other organic materials, creating a complex nutrient profile that mirrors the varied diet tomatoes would encounter in nature. This diversity helps ensure that plants receive not just the major nutrients, but also the trace elements and micronutrients essential for optimal health. The transformation that occurs when organic matter is added to tomato growing areas is often visible within a single growing season. Plants grown in amended soil typically show deeper green foliage, stronger stems, more abundant flowering, and increased fruit production. The improved soil biology also enhances disease resistance, as beneficial microorganisms can outcompete harmful pathogens for resources and space. As we've explored these fundamental aspects of tomato plant biology and requirements, we've laid the groundwork for understanding how to create optimal growing conditions. These basics, recognizing their perennial nature, understanding their family relationships, providing adequate sunlight, ensuring proper soil conditions, and enriching with organic matter, form the foundation upon which all successful tomato growing is built. With this solid understanding of what tomatoes need at the most basic level, we're now prepared to delve deeper into the practical aspects of cultivation, exploring the specific varieties that might work best for different growing situations and gardening goals. Now that we've established the fundamental requirements for successful tomato cultivation, let's turn our attention to where every great tomato journey begins: the humble seed. While you certainly can purchase transplants from your local nursery, there's something deeply satisfying about nurturing a tomato plant from its very beginning. Moreover, starting from seed opens up a world of variety options that you'll never find at the garden center, allowing you to explore heirloom varieties, unusual colors, and specialized cultivars perfectly suited to your specific growing conditions and taste preferences. The process of growing tomatoes from seed might seem daunting at first, but with the right knowledge and approach, it's actually quite straightforward. In fact, understanding the seed starting process will give you greater control over your plant's development and help you produce stronger, more resilient tomatoes that are perfectly adapted to your garden's timeline. To successfully start tomatoes from seed, we first need to understand what's happening beneath the soil surface. Tomato seeds are remarkably responsive to temperature, and this temperature sensitivity is perhaps the most critical factor in achieving consistent germination. Research has consistently shown that tomato seeds germinate best when maintained at a steady temperature between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or 21 to 27 degrees Celsius. This temperature range isn't arbitrary. It reflects the conditions that tomato seeds would encounter in their native environment. When seeds are kept within this optimal range, the biochemical processes that trigger germination proceed efficiently and reliably. The enzymes responsible for breaking down stored nutrients within the seed work most effectively at these temperatures, while the cellular processes that initiate root and shoot development proceed at their ideal pace. Interestingly, temperature consistency matters more than brief temperature spikes. A seed tray that maintains a steady 75 degrees will typically outperform one that fluctuates between 65 and 85 degrees, even though the average temperature might be similar. This is why many experienced gardeners invest in seed starting heat mats, or place their seed trays in consistently warm locations, like the top of a refrigerator or near a heating vent. When conditions are optimal, most tomato seeds will begin to show signs of life within 5 to 10 days. However, this time frame can vary based on several factors beyond temperature. Seed age plays a significant role. Fresh seeds from the current or previous year typically germinate faster and more uniformly than older seeds. The specific variety also influences germination speed, with some heirloom varieties taking slightly longer than modern hybrids to sprout. Moisture levels during germination are equally important. Though often less understood by beginning gardeners, the soil should be consistently moist but never waterlogged. Seeds need moisture to activate the germination process, but excess water can lead to fungal problems or cause seeds to rot before they have a chance to sprout. Think of it as maintaining the moisture level of a wrung-out sponge, damp throughout, but not dripping wet. The timing of when to start your tomato seeds indoors is crucial for success, and this timing depends entirely on understanding your local climate patterns. The general rule of thumb is to start tomato seeds indoors 6 to 8 weeks before your area's last expected frost date. This timing ensures that your seedlings will be at the perfect stage for transplanting when outdoor conditions become favorable. However, determining your last frost date requires some local knowledge and research. This date can vary significantly, even within the same general region, depending on factors like elevation, proximity to large bodies of water, and local microclimates. Urban areas tend to have later frost dates than rural areas due to the heat island effect, while low-lying areas may experience frost later than nearby hillsides. The 6 to 8 week window provides flexibility based on your specific growing situation and goals. If you're planning to transplant directly into the garden, 6 weeks is often sufficient to produce sturdy seedlings ready for outdoor life. However, if you intend to grow your tomatoes in containers or want particularly robust plants, extending the indoor growing period to 8 weeks can result in more mature transplants that establish more quickly once moved outside. During this indoor growing period, your seedlings will progress through several distinct developmental stages. The first week or two after germination are spent developing the initial root system and producing the first true leaves. Weeks 3 and 4 typically see rapid stem elongation and the development of additional leaf sets. By weeks 5 and 6, the plants should have a well-established root system and several sets of true leaves, making them resilient enough to handle the transition to outdoor conditions. Planning your seed starting timeline also means considering your garden's planting schedule. If you're growing multiple varieties with different maturation dates, you might want to stagger your seed starting to ensure all varieties are ready for transplanting at the same time. Alternatively, you might choose to start all seeds simultaneously, but plan different transplant dates based on each variety's specific needs. One of the most common challenges faced by indoor seed starters is providing adequate light for developing tomato seedlings. Unlike mature plants that can tolerate various light conditions, young tomato seedlings have very specific light requirements that, when not met, result in weak, spindly plants that struggle to thrive once transplanted outdoors. Tomato seedlings need strong, consistent light to develop properly. In nature, they would receive direct sunlight for most of the day, providing both the intensity and spectrum of light necessary for healthy growth. Unfortunately, most indoor environments, even those with large south-facing windows, simply don't provide enough light to match these natural conditions. When seedlings don't receive adequate light, they exhibit a phenomenon called etiolation, commonly referred to as becoming leggy. These plants stretch dramatically toward whatever light source is available, developing long, thin stems and widely spaced leaves. While this might seem like rapid growth, it's actually a sign of stress. Leggy seedlings are fundamentally weak. Their elongated stems cannot properly support the plant's weight, making them prone to breaking and struggling to establish themselves once transplanted. The solution lies in providing artificial supplemental lighting specifically designed for plant growth. LED grow lights have become increasingly popular and effective for seed starting, offering several advantages over older fluorescent options. They produce less heat, use less electricity, and can be fine-tuned to provide the specific light spectrum that promotes healthy plant development. When setting up grow lights for tomato seedlings, positioning is crucial. The lights should be placed close enough to provide adequate intensity, typically 2 to 4 inches above the seedlings, but not so close as to cause heat stress. As the seedlings grow, the lights need to be adjusted to maintain this optimal distance. Most seedlings benefit from 14 to 16 hours of artificial light per day, mimicking the long days of late spring when they would naturally be growing most vigorously. Even with perfect lighting, it's important to monitor your seedlings for signs of either too much or too little light. Seedlings receiving inadequate light will stretch and pale, while those receiving too much intense light may develop brown or bleached areas on their leaves. The goal is finding that sweet spot where plants grow steadily upward while maintaining compact, sturdy stems and deep green foliage. Among the more interesting and lesser-known techniques for raising strong tomato seedlings is the practice of physically stimulating them to mimic natural wind conditions. This might sound unusual, but it's based on solid plant biology and can make a remarkable difference in the strength and resilience of your transplants. In outdoor environments, plants are constantly subjected to air movement, from gentle breezes to stronger winds. This mechanical stimulation triggers a response in plants called thigmomorphogenesis, which essentially means growth response to touch. When plants experience this physical stimulation, they respond by developing stronger, more flexible stems and more robust root systems. The technique itself is surprisingly simple. Gently brush your hand over the tops of your seedlings for a few seconds each day. Some gardeners prefer to use a soft brush or even a piece of cardboard to create this gentle air movement. The key is to be gentle but consistent. You're not trying to shake the plants vigorously, but rather create the sensation of a light breeze moving through the seedlings. This daily stimulation should begin once the seedlings have developed their first true leaves and should continue throughout their indoor growing period. Many gardeners find it convenient to incorporate this into their daily watering routine, taking just a few extra seconds to brush over each tray of seedlings. The benefits of this technique become apparent when it's time to transplant. Seedlings that have been regularly stimulated in this way typically have noticeably thicker, stronger stems and seem to handle the transplant shock much better than those that haven't received this treatment. They're also more resistant to being damaged by wind once moved outdoors, requiring less time to acclimate to their new environment. Some gardeners achieve similar results by placing a small oscillating fan near their seedling setup, set on the lowest speed to create gentle air movement. This approach requires less daily attention, but needs to be monitored to ensure the air movement isn't too strong for young seedlings. Successfully starting tomato seeds involves orchestrating several environmental factors simultaneously. Beyond temperature and lighting, factors like humidity, air circulation, and growing medium all play important roles in producing healthy, vigorous seedlings. Humidity management often gets overlooked, but it's particularly important during the germination phase. Most seeds benefit from higher humidity levels while they're sprouting, which is why many seed starting trays come with clear plastic domes. These domes help maintain consistent moisture levels and create a greenhouse-like environment that encourages rapid germination. However, once seedlings emerge, it's important to gradually reduce humidity levels to prevent fungal problems. Damping off disease, which causes seedlings to suddenly collapse and die, thrives in conditions of high humidity and poor air circulation. Removing the dome gradually, perhaps propping it open slightly at first, then removing it entirely, helps seedlings adjust to lower humidity while reducing disease risk. Air circulation becomes increasingly important as seedlings develop. Stagnant air encourages fungal growth and prevents the natural strengthening that comes from gentle air movement. A small fan running on low speed, positioned to create gentle air movement without directly blasting the seedlings, can make a significant difference in plant health and development. The choice of growing medium also influences success rates. While regular potting soil might seem like the obvious choice, seed starting mixes are specifically formulated to provide the ideal balance of drainage, moisture retention, and nutrients for germinating seeds and young seedlings. These mixes are typically finer in texture than regular potting soil, making it easier for small seeds to push through, and they're often formulated to provide gentle nutrition without overwhelming young plants. Starting tomatoes from seed represents one of the most rewarding aspects of vegetable gardening, connecting us directly to the complete life cycle of these remarkable plants. By understanding the specific needs of germinating seeds and young seedlings, from optimal temperature ranges and lighting requirements to the subtle benefits of mechanical stimulation, we set the foundation for robust, productive plants that will serve us well throughout the growing season. The techniques we've explored in this section might seem detail-oriented, but each one contributes to producing stronger, more resilient seedlings that transplant successfully and establish quickly in the garden. As we'll discover in our next section, this careful attention to seedling development pays dividends when it comes time to select the right varieties for your specific growing situation and goals. With a solid understanding of seeds starting under our belts, we're ready to explore the fascinating world of tomato varieties. From determinate versus indeterminate growth habits to the incredible diversity of sizes, colors, and flavors available. To the home gardener, the strong seedlings we've learned to produce will serve as the perfect foundation for whatever varieties we choose to grow. Now that we've mastered the art of starting tomato seeds and nurturing those first precious seedlings, it's time to take the next crucial step in our tomato growing journey. The transition from protected indoor seedlings to thriving outdoor plants requires careful timing, proper technique, and an understanding of how tomatoes naturally grow and develop. The question every new tomato grower asks is simple yet vital. When exactly should I move my seedlings outdoors? The answer lies in observing your plants carefully and understanding what they're telling you about their readiness for the big move. Your tomato seedlings are ready for transplanting when they develop their second set of true leaves. These aren't the initial seed leaves, called cotyledons, that first emerge from the soil. True leaves are the distinctly tomato-shaped leaves that appear after the cotyledons, complete with the characteristic serrated edges and that unmistakable tomato scent when you brush against them. This stage typically occurs about 6 to 8 weeks after germination, though the exact timing can vary based on growing conditions, variety, and environmental factors. The presence of 2 sets of true leaves indicates that your seedlings have developed a robust enough root system and sufficient leaf surface area to handle the stress of transplanting and the transition to outdoor conditions. However, timing isn't just about plant development. It's equally important to consider your local climate conditions. Even if your seedlings are ready, you must wait until all danger of frost has passed in your area. Tomatoes are incredibly sensitive to cold temperatures, and even a light frost can kill or severely damage young plants. Most gardeners find that late spring, typically 2 to 3 weeks after the last expected frost date, provides the ideal transplanting window. Once you've determined that both your plants and the weather are ready, the actual transplanting process requires attention to detail that can make the difference between thriving plants and struggling survivors. The technique you use during this critical transition will influence your plant's development for the entire growing season. Begin by preparing your planting site well in advance. Choose a location that receives at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight daily, as tomatoes are sun-loving plants that need abundant light to produce their best fruit. The soil should be well-draining, yet moisture-retentive, with a pH between 6.0 and 6.8 for optimal nutrient uptake. Here's where many gardeners make a crucial mistake. They plant their tomato seedlings at the same depth they were growing in their containers. Instead, you should employ a technique that might seem counterintuitive, but produces remarkably stronger plants. Bury part of the stem along with the root ball. This deep planting method takes advantage of tomatoes' unique ability to develop roots along their buried stems. Those tiny hairs you see along the tomato stem aren't just decorative. They're potential root sites waiting to be activated. When you bury these nodes in soil, they transform into a robust secondary root system that dramatically improves the plant's ability to absorb water and nutrients. To implement this technique, dig your planting hole deep enough to accommodate not just the root ball, but also the lower portion of the stem. Remove the bottom sets of leaves from the stem that will be buried, leaving only the top growth above ground. This might mean burying up to 2/3 of your seedling's height, which can seem alarming at first, but trust the process. Your plants will thank you with vigorous growth. The newly buried stem sections will develop roots within days of transplanting, creating a much more extensive and effective root system than surface planting could ever achieve. This enhanced root development translates directly into stronger, more resilient plants that can better withstand drought stress, support heavier fruit loads, and resist many common tomato problems. As your transplanted seedlings begin to establish themselves in their new outdoor home, they'll start expressing their genetic programming in the form of their growth habit. Understanding whether your tomatoes are determinate or indeterminate is crucial for providing appropriate support and managing your garden space effectively. Determinate tomatoes, often called bush types, have a predetermined size and growth pattern programmed into their genetics. These plants typically reach a mature height of 3 to 4 feet and develop a relatively compact, bushy appearance. Their growth follows a predictable pattern. They produce leaves and stems for a certain period, then switch almost entirely to flower and fruit production. This growth characteristic makes determinate varieties particularly valuable for several specific situations. If you're growing tomatoes in containers, determinate varieties are often the better choice because their smaller stature makes them more manageable in limited space. They're also ideal for gardeners who prefer to harvest their entire crop within a relatively short window, perhaps for canning or sauce-making projects. The concentrated fruiting period of determinate tomatoes means you'll get most of your harvest within a few weeks, which can be both an advantage and a limitation depending on your goals. For preservation purposes, this concentrated harvest can be perfect. But if you prefer fresh tomatoes throughout the growing season, you might want to plant multiple successions of determinate varieties or consider indeterminate types. In contrast, indeterminate tomatoes follow a completely different growth strategy that can dramatically transform your garden landscape. These varieties are often called vining types, though they don't actually produce true vines like grapes or beans. Instead, they continue growing upward throughout the entire growing season, producing new leaves, stems, flowers, and fruits in an ongoing cycle that continues until stopped by frost or disease. The growth potential of indeterminate tomatoes can be truly spectacular. While determinate varieties stop at 3 to 4 feet, indeterminate tomatoes can easily reach 6 to 8 feet in height, and under ideal conditions, some varieties have been known to exceed 10 feet or more. This vigorous growth habit means indeterminate varieties can produce substantially larger harvests over a much longer period. The continuous growth and fruiting pattern of indeterminate varieties provides a steady supply of fresh tomatoes from midsummer through the first frost. Rather than getting all your tomatoes at once, you'll have ripe fruit to harvest regularly throughout the season. This extended harvest period makes indeterminate varieties particularly appealing for fresh eating and regular cooking needs. However, this impressive growth comes with increased management requirements. Indeterminate tomatoes need substantial support structures to handle their size and weight, and they often benefit from regular pruning to maintain manageable proportions and optimize fruit production. Regardless of whether you're growing determinate or indeterminate varieties, providing adequate support for your tomato plants is essential for healthy development and optimal fruit production. The support system you choose and install will influence not just plant health, but also ease of maintenance, harvest efficiency, and overall garden aesthetics. Many beginning gardeners underestimate the weight and size that healthy tomato plants can achieve. A mature indeterminate tomato plant loaded with fruit can easily weigh 50 pounds or more, creating forces that can snap unsupported stems or topple inadequate support structures. Even determinate varieties, while smaller, produce concentrated fruit loads that can overwhelm unsupported branches. Tomato cages represent the most popular support option for home gardeners, and for good reason. Quality cages provide 360-degree support that grows with the plant, creating a framework that supports both the main stem and developing side branches. However, not all cages are created equal, and choosing the right type makes a significant difference in effectiveness. The flimsy, short cages, commonly found at garden centers, are often inadequate for anything but the smallest determinate varieties. These lightweight cages typically stand only 3 to 4 feet tall and are made from thin wire that can bend or break under the weight of a productive plant. For serious tomato growing, invest in heavy-duty cages that stand at least 5 to 6 feet tall and are constructed from thick, sturdy wire or metal tubing. Alternatively, many experienced growers prefer staking systems that offer more precise control over plant development. Staking involves driving a sturdy post, typically 6 to 8 feet tall, into the ground near each plant and tying the main stem to the stake at regular intervals as the plant grows. The staking method requires more ongoing attention than caging, as you'll need to add new ties every week or two throughout the growing season. However, this system allows for better air circulation around the plant, easier access for pruning and harvesting, and more efficient use of garden space. Since plants can be grown closer together, for indeterminate varieties that can reach impressive heights, consider hybrid support systems that combine the benefits of both cages and stakes. Some gardeners install tall stakes and surround them with cage-like wire frameworks, creating incredibly robust support systems capable of handling even the most vigorous varieties. The first few weeks after transplanting represent a critical establishment period that sets the stage for your entire growing season. During this time, your plants are adapting to their new environment, developing their expanded root systems, and beginning the transition from survival mode to growth mode. Consistent moisture management during this establishment period cannot be overstated in importance. Newly transplanted seedlings have limited root systems that haven't yet spread throughout the surrounding soil, making them particularly vulnerable to water stress. However, overwatering can be equally problematic, potentially leading to root rot or other moisture-related issues. The goal is to maintain consistent soil moisture without waterlogging. This typically means watering deeply but less frequently, encouraging roots to grow deeper in search of moisture rather than staying near the surface. A good rule of thumb is to water when the top inch of soil feels dry to the touch. Then water thoroughly until you see moisture beginning to drain from the planting area. As your transplanted seedlings begin showing signs of new growth, typically new leaves appearing within a week or two of transplanting, you can gradually reduce the frequency of watering while maintaining the deep watering approach. This encourages the development of the robust root system that will sustain your plants through the heat of summer and support heavy fruit production. With your tomato plants successfully transplanted and beginning to establish their growth patterns, you've accomplished one of the most critical phases of tomato cultivation. The strong foundation you've created through proper seed starting, careful transplanting, and appropriate support installation will pay dividends throughout the growing season. As we move forward in our tomato growing journey, we'll explore the ongoing care and maintenance practices that transform these newly transplanted seedlings into productive, healthy plants. From watering strategies and fertilization programs to pruning techniques and pest management, the next phase of tomato growing builds directly on the solid foundation we've established through proper transplanting and growth habit understanding. Step 4. Investment in time and attention you've made during these early stages, from seed starting through transplanting and support installation, represents the most critical period in your plant's development. With these fundamentals mastered, you're well positioned to guide your tomato plants through their remarkable transformation from small seedlings to productive garden superstars. As your tomato plants continue their journey from transplanted seedlings to mature garden performers, the most exciting phase lies just ahead. While establishing strong roots and sturdy stems has been crucial, the transition into flowering and fruiting marks the moment when all your careful preparation begins to pay visible dividends. Consequently, when those first cheerful yellow blossoms appear on your tomato plants, it's time to celebrate a major milestone. These small but significant flowers signal that fruit is coming soon, transforming your green leafy plants into productive food factories. The appearance of flowers typically occurs 6 to 8 weeks after transplanting, though this timing can vary based on variety, growing conditions, and environmental factors. Understanding the anatomy of tomato flowers reveals why they're so perfectly designed for fruit production. Each flower contains both male and female parts, making tomatoes what botanists call perfect flowers. The bright yellow petals serve as landing pads for pollinators, while the central cluster of stamens produces pollen, and the pistil in the center receives it for fertilization. Furthermore, the timing of flower development follows a predictable pattern that helps gardeners anticipate harvest schedules. Determinate varieties tend to produce flowers in concentrated clusters over a shorter period, while indeterminate types continue flowering throughout the growing season. This difference explains why some gardeners enjoy extended harvests, while others experience concentrated periods of abundance. The health and vigor of your flowers directly impacts fruit quality and quantity. Strong, well-nourished plants produce robust flowers with viable pollen, while stressed plants may drop flowers before fruit formation begins. Environmental factors like extreme temperatures, inadequate water, or nutrient imbalances can significantly affect flowering success. Moving from flower formation to fruit development, pollination becomes the critical bridge that transforms blossoms into tomatoes. Bees and wind naturally pollinate tomatoes, creating an elegant system that has evolved over centuries. However, understanding this process empowers gardeners to intervene when natural conditions fall short. Wild and domestic bees serve as primary pollinators for tomato flowers, their fuzzy bodies collecting and transferring pollen as they move from bloom to bloom. The vibration created by their wing beats helps release pollen from the flower's anthers, a process called buzz pollination that makes bees incredibly effective tomato pollinators. Native bumblebees are particularly excellent at this task, their large size and vigorous buzzing ensuring thorough pollen distribution. Similarly, wind plays a crucial role in tomato pollination, gently shaking flowers and helping pollen move from male to female parts within the same blossom. This is why tomato plants growing in protected environments like greenhouses sometimes struggle with pollination. The absence of natural air movement can reduce fruit set significantly. Nevertheless, hand pollination also works remarkably well. giving gardeners control over fruit production when natural pollinators are scarce. The technique is surprisingly simple. Using a small brush, cotton swab, or even your finger, gently transfer pollen from the stamens to the pistil within each flower. Some gardeners prefer the flick method, simply tapping flower clusters gently to release and redistribute pollen. The timing of hand pollination matters considerably. Morning hours, typically between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., provide optimal conditions when pollen is most viable and flowers are fully open. During this window, humidity levels are usually perfect for pollen transfer, and flowers haven't yet been stressed by afternoon heat. Weather conditions significantly influence pollination success, regardless of the method. Temperatures above 90 degrees or below 55 degrees can reduce pollen viability, while excessive humidity or rainfall can wash away pollen or make it sticky and difficult to transfer. Understanding these factors helps explain why some growing seasons produce better fruit set than others. Transitioning from pollination to fruit development, regular watering becomes absolutely key, especially when fruits begin to form. The period immediately following successful pollination represents one of the most water-critical phases in a tomato plant's life cycle. During this time, proper moisture management can mean the difference between abundant harvests and disappointing yields. Consistent soil moisture supports cellular division and expansion within developing fruits, ensuring proper size and preventing common problems like blossom end rot. Young fruits are particularly vulnerable to water stress, which can cause them to drop from the plant or develop irregularly. Establishing a reliable watering routine during fruit development sets the foundation for healthy, full-size tomatoes. Deep, infrequent watering proves more beneficial than frequent shallow applications. This approach encourages roots to grow deeper into the soil, creating a more resilient plant that can better withstand periods of drought or irregular rainfall. Most tomato plants require approximately 1 to 2 inches of water per week, including rainfall, though this amount may increase during hot weather, or peak fruit development. Moreover, the method of water delivery impacts plant health and fruit quality. Drip irrigation or soaker hoses deliver water directly to the root zone while keeping foliage dry, reducing the risk of fungal diseases that thrive in moist conditions. When overhead watering is necessary, morning application allows leaves to dry quickly, minimizing disease pressure. Mulching around tomato plants conserves soil moisture and reduces watering frequency while providing additional benefits. Organic mulches like straw, shredded leaves, or grass clippings break down over time, adding nutrients to the soil and improving its water-holding capacity. A 3 to 4 inch layer of mulch can reduce water needs by up to 30%, while suppressing weeds that compete for moisture. Container-grown tomatoes require special attention to watering since pots dry out much faster than garden soil. These plants may need daily watering during hot weather, and the larger the container, the more stable the moisture levels will be. Self-watering containers or drip irrigation systems can help maintain consistent moisture for potted plants. However, while proper watering supports fruit development, nutrient management requires careful balance to avoid common pitfalls. Too much nitrogen causes leafy plants but few fruits, creating lush, green giants that look impressive but produce disappointing harvests. Understanding this nitrogen paradox is crucial for optimizing tomato production. Nitrogen promotes vigorous vegetative growth, encouraging plants to produce leaves, stems, and branches, rather than focusing energy on flower and fruit development. While some nitrogen is essential for healthy plant growth, excessive amounts shift the plant's priorities away from reproduction and toward continued vegetative expansion. This imbalance often occurs when gardeners apply high nitrogen fertilizers too frequently or in excessive quantities, particularly during the flowering and fruiting stages. The result is tall, bushy plants with dark green foliage, but relatively few flowers and fruits. Recognizing these symptoms helps gardeners adjust their fertilization approach before yields suffer significantly. Consequently, successful tomato nutrition involves reducing nitrogen applications once flowering begins while maintaining adequate phosphorus and potassium levels. Phosphorus supports flower development and fruit set, while potassium improves fruit quality and plant disease resistance. A balanced approach might involve switching from a high nitrogen starter fertilizer to a bloom booster formula with higher phosphorus content. Organic gardeners can manage nitrogen levels through compost timing and cover crop selection. Fresh compost tends to be higher in nitrogen, making it more appropriate for early season application, while well-aged compost provides more balanced nutrition suitable for the fruiting period. Green manures like legumes can fix nitrogen in the soil, but incorporating them too close to planting time may create nitrogen excess. Soil testing provides valuable insight into nutrient levels and helps guide fertilization decisions. Many gardeners discover that their soil already contains adequate nitrogen, making additional applications unnecessary or counterproductive. Understanding your soil's baseline nutrition helps create targeted feeding programs that support fruit production rather than excessive foliage growth. In addition to nutrient management, trimming suckers helps focus energy on fruit production, representing one of the most effective cultural practices for maximizing tomato yields. Suckers are shoots that emerge from the junction between the main stem and branches, and while they can eventually produce flowers and fruits, they often divert energy from the plant's primary productive branches. Understanding sucker biology explains why their removal benefits overall production. These shoots develop rapidly, competing with established branches for the plant's resources. In indeterminate varieties particularly, unchecked sucker growth can create dense, tangled plants with reduced air circulation and light penetration, leading to increased disease pressure and smaller fruits. The timing of sucker removal significantly impacts its effectiveness and the plant's response. Young, tender suckers are easiest to remove and cause the least stress to the plant. These can often be pinched off with fingers when they're 2 to 4 inches long, eliminating the need for cutting tools that might transmit diseases between plants. Regular inspection and maintenance prove more effective than occasional major pruning sessions. Weekly sucker removal prevents shoots from becoming too large and woody, making the task easier and less stressful for the plant. This routine also allows gardeners to monitor plant health and catch potential problems early. Different tomato types require varying approaches to sucker management. Determinate varieties generally need less sucker removal, since their growth pattern is naturally more compact and controlled. Indeterminate varieties benefit significantly from regular sucker pruning, particularly on the lower portion of the plant, where suckers are most likely to touch the ground and create disease entry points. Some gardeners prefer partial sucker removal, allowing small suckers to develop 2 sets of leaves before pinching out the growing tip. This technique, called Missouri pruning, provides additional photosynthetic surface while limiting excessive vegetative growth. The approach works particularly well in areas with intense sunlight where extra foliage helps protect fruits from sun scald. As the flowering and fruiting phase unfolds, successful tomato growing becomes an orchestrated balance of observation, intervention, and patience. The yellow flowers that first signal impending harvests develop into swelling fruits through the complex interplay of pollination, adequate moisture, balanced nutrition, and focused plant energy. Each element of care during this critical period builds upon the foundation established during earlier growth stages. The strong root systems developed during transplanting now support increased water uptake for fruit development. The structural support installed earlier bears the weight of heavy fruit clusters. The careful attention to plant spacing pays dividends in improved air circulation and reduced disease pressure. Moving forward into the final phase of tomato production, the practices established during flowering and fruiting will determine not only the quantity of your harvest, but also the quality and timing of ripe fruit production. The investment in consistent care, from regular watering to thoughtful pruning, creates the conditions for tomato plants to fulfill their remarkable potential as productive garden centerpieces. As your tomato plants reach their full potential and begin producing those coveted fruits, the excitement of harvest season arrives. However, the journey from flower to table involves more than simply plucking ripe tomatoes from the vine. Understanding the nuances of proper harvesting techniques, timing, and post-harvest handling can make the difference between mediocre tomatoes and truly exceptional ones that showcase months of careful cultivation. The art of harvesting tomatoes encompasses not only knowing when to pick them, but also understanding how to maximize their flavor, extend their shelf life, and make the most of every single fruit your plants produce. Whether you're dealing with perfectly ripe specimens or facing the challenge of end-of-season green tomatoes, mastering these final steps ensures that your gardening efforts translate into the most rewarding culinary experiences possible. Before diving into harvesting techniques, it's essential to understand what happens inside a tomato as it ripens. This process, known as fruit maturation, involves complex biochemical changes that transform a hard, green fruit into the juicy, flavorful tomato we know and love. The ripening process begins when tomatoes reach what's called the mature green stage, where they've achieved their full size but haven't yet begun changing color. During ripening, several crucial transformations occur simultaneously. The fruit's chlorophyll breaks down, revealing the underlying pigments that give tomatoes their characteristic colors. Simultaneously, enzymes convert starches into sugars. Acids balance out to create the perfect sweet-tart flavor profile, and the fruit's texture softens as cell walls break down. This intricate dance of chemistry is what creates the difference between a tomato that tastes like cardboard and one that bursts with flavor. Understanding this process helps explain why timing is so critical in harvesting. Furthermore, recognizing that ripening continues even after harvest opens up possibilities for managing your harvest more effectively, especially when dealing with large quantities or unpredictable weather conditions. Determining the perfect moment to harvest your tomatoes requires developing a keen eye and understanding the subtle signs that indicate peak ripeness. The most obvious indicator is color development, but this can vary significantly depending on the variety you're growing. While most people associate ripe tomatoes with deep red coloration, many heirloom varieties ripen to purple, yellow, orange, green, or even striped patterns. Beyond color, texture provides another crucial clue. A ripe tomato should yield slightly to gentle pressure without feeling soft or mushy. The skin should have a slight give when pressed with your thumb, similar to how a ripe peach feels. Additionally, ripe tomatoes often develop a subtle glossy sheen and may emit a sweet, earthy aroma near the stem end. The timing of harvest also depends on your intended use for the tomatoes. For immediate consumption, allowing fruits to ripen completely on the vine typically produces the best flavor. However, if you're planning to store tomatoes for later use or transport them, harvesting them at the breaker stage, when they're just beginning to show color change, can be more practical while still allowing for excellent flavor development. Proper harvesting technique protects both the fruit and the plant, ensuring continued production throughout the growing season. When removing tomatoes from the vine, use a gentle twisting motion while supporting the fruit with your other hand. This prevents damage to the stem and reduces stress on the plant's branches. For tomatoes that resist easy removal, use clean pruning shears or a sharp knife to cut the stem just above the fruit. This is particularly important for cherry tomatoes and other small varieties that tend to grow in clusters. When harvesting cluster tomatoes, you can often remove the entire cluster at once, which makes an attractive presentation and keeps the fruits together for even ripening. Always harvest with clean hands or tools to prevent the spread of diseases. Additionally, avoid harvesting when plants are wet from dew or watering, as this increases the risk of spreading bacterial and fungal infections. The best time for harvesting is typically in the morning after the dew has dried, but before the heat of the day sets in. While tomatoes ripen best on the vine, circumstances often require indoor ripening. Late-season frosts, approaching storms, or simply managing large harvests may necessitate bringing green or partially ripe tomatoes indoors. Fortunately, tomatoes continue ripening after harvest, and with proper techniques, you can achieve excellent results indoors. The key to successful indoor ripening lies in controlling temperature and humidity. Tomatoes ripen best at temperatures between 65-75 degrees with moderate humidity. Avoid direct sunlight, which can cause uneven ripening and tough skin. Instead, place tomatoes in a warm, well-ventilated area away from direct light. For faster ripening, place tomatoes in a paper bag with a ripe banana or apple. These fruits release ethylene gas, which accelerates the ripening process. Check daily and remove any tomatoes that show signs of spoilage to prevent affecting others. Conversely, if you want to slow ripening, store tomatoes in a cooler location, around 55-60 degree warmth, which can extend their shelf life significantly. Once you've mastered harvesting and ripening, proper storage becomes crucial for maintaining quality and extending the life of your tomatoes. The cardinal rule of tomato storage is simple Never refrigerate fresh tomatoes. Refrigeration breaks down the compounds responsible for tomato flavor and creates a mealy texture that's impossible to reverse. Instead, store ripe tomatoes at room temperature, stem side down to prevent moisture loss through the stem scar. Use ripe tomatoes within a few days for best quality, though they can last up to a week when properly stored. For longer storage, consider preservation methods such as canning, freezing, or dehydrating. When storing tomatoes, keep them separated from other fruits and vegetables when possible. Tomatoes are sensitive to ethylene gas and can become overripe quickly when stored near other ethylene-producing fruits. Additionally, the strong aroma of ripe tomatoes can affect the flavor of nearby foods. As the growing season winds down, gardeners often find themselves with an abundance of green tomatoes that won't have time to ripen naturally. Rather than viewing these as waste, consider them as opportunities for culinary creativity. Green tomatoes offer unique flavors and textures that can enhance your cooking repertoire significantly. Fried green tomatoes represent perhaps the most famous use for unripe tomatoes. The firm texture of green tomatoes holds up beautifully too. Breading and frying, creating a delicious contrast between the crispy exterior and tangy interior. Similarly, green tomatoes excel in pickled preparations, where their tartness and firm texture create excellent condiments that can last for months. Green tomato chutney offers another excellent preservation option, combining the tartness of unripe tomatoes with spices and vinegar to create a complex condiment that pairs beautifully with meats and cheeses. Additionally, green tomatoes can be incorporated into salsas, relishes, and even baked goods like breads and muffins, where their acidity provides a pleasant contrast to sweet elements. As we conclude our comprehensive journey through tomato growing, it's worth celebrating some of the remarkable facts that make tomatoes such fascinating plants. The diversity of tomato varieties is truly staggering, with thousands of cultivars ranging from tiny currant tomatoes, smaller than grapes, to massive beefsteaks that can weigh several pounds each. The current world record for the heaviest tomato stands at an astounding 10 pounds 12.7 ounces, grown by Scott Robb in Oklahoma. This massive fruit demonstrates the incredible genetic potential within tomato plants when provided with optimal growing conditions. Such record-breaking specimens require exceptional care, including specialized fertilization, precise watering, and often the removal of competing fruits to channel all the plant's energy into a single tomato. Beyond size records, tomatoes display remarkable diversity in color, shape, and flavor. From purple Cherokee varieties to striped Mr. Stripey tomatoes, from heart-shaped Coeur de Boeuf to perfectly round Roma paste tomatoes, the visual diversity alone is captivating. This diversity extends to flavor profiles as well, ranging from intensely sweet to pleasantly tart, with complex undertones that can include hints of wine, fruit, or even smoky characteristics. Tomatoes aren't just delicious. They're nutritional powerhouses packed with essential vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. They're particularly rich in lycopene, a powerful antioxidant that gives red tomatoes their color and has been linked to numerous health benefits. Interestingly, cooking tomatoes actually increases the bioavailability of lycopene, making tomato sauce and paste excellent sources of this important compound. Fresh tomatoes also provide significant amounts of vitamin C, potassium, folate, and vitamin K. They're naturally low in calories, but high in water content, making them excellent for hydration and weight management. The combination of nutrients in tomatoes supports heart health, bone health, and may even help protect against certain types of cancer. The journey of tomatoes from their origins in South America to becoming one of the world's most beloved foods represents a fascinating chapter in agricultural and cultural history. Initially viewed with suspicion in Europe due to their relation to poisonous nightshade plants, tomatoes gradually gained acceptance and eventually became central to many cuisines worldwide. Today, tomatoes are integral to countless dishes across cultures, from Italian pasta sauces to Mexican salsas, from Indian curries to American sandwiches. This global adoption demonstrates the remarkable adaptability and appeal of this versatile fruit, which botanically is indeed a fruit despite its culinary treatment as a vegetable. The journey from seed to harvest represents one of gardening's most rewarding experiences, and tomatoes offer particularly satisfying results for dedicated growers. By mastering the art of proper harvesting, understanding ripening processes, and learning to make the most of every fruit your plants produce, you complete the circle of successful tomato cultivation. Whether you're savoring a perfectly ripe tomato, warm from the vine, creating delicious meals from your harvest, or preserving the bounty for future enjoyment, the skills and knowledge you've developed throughout this growing journey will serve you well for years to come. The combination of patience, observation, and care that successful tomato growing requires translates into rewards that extend far beyond the garden, enriching your table and connecting you to the timeless satisfaction of growing your own food. As you reflect on the journey from those first tiny seeds to the abundant harvest now before you, take pride in the knowledge that you've mastered one of gardening's most beloved challenges. The experience, wisdom, and delicious results you've gained will undoubtedly inspire continued adventures in tomato growing, each season building upon the last to create ever more successful and rewarding harvests.